Welcome back to the IE427 garage, everybody. Today I'm working on electrical on our King's Cobra, and well, I'll show you some of the stuff I've already done. I got to a point where I had to, I figured I had to pick up the camera because I found something, and I'll go over that in a second. But anyways, so what we're doing is we put a battery stud on the firewall. And this is not a requirement, but what I've found is by putting a battery stud here, you can consolidate all your cables and get rid of some of this stuff so that you don't have all these red wires landing down on the battery along with your battery cable. You can put everything up here, and so down at your battery it's nice and clean, so if you ever have to replace the starter, you're not dealing with multiple wires that you have to pull apart in order to get the starter out. It cleans up the alternator feed, so it's shorter, it's going to work better, and I just like doing it this way. Now, I went ahead and I put some threaded inserts in for the battery stud because for whatever reason, this one's different than the last one that we've been using, and I couldn't get the rivet gun in there to set the rivets for the stud. Mrs. IE427 interrupted me to find out what I wanted for dinner. So that's why I put the battery terminal or the battery stud there on the firewall. To me, it just makes everything easier. It makes the runs coming from your key switch and your fuse box shorter. It just helps to tidy everything up underneath the hood. And if you ever need to use a timing light and it requires power, it gives you a nice spot to be able to hook up power for your timing light too, where you don't have to go under the car and attach it to the battery, or our battery's not hard to get to it, it's in the front of the car, but you can see where if the battery is located in the back, how it would be much easier than running power all the way to the back of the car to run your timing light. Anyways, so I've got that taken care of, and what I'm going to do, we've already started, in one of the last videos, we started taking care of all these wires that go to the engine. I've got these all cut to length. They just need to be loomed. But when I got to the wires for the alternator is when I decided that I really needed to stop and put in our firewall battery terminal just so that I could clean all this stuff up at the same time. So I'm going to work through that, but let me show you how the day started. And that was, I started with the safety switches for the brake pedal and for the clutch pedal. So everybody knows what these are, okay? Factory 5 gives you two of these, one for your clutch pedal, one for your brake pedal. The ones that they give you, one, they're wired backwards from the actual GM units, which makes no sense to me. So if you were gonna change these out in your GM vehicle, they would not work right. But we're changing these out just for the reliability factor. There have been so many reports from within the Factory 5 community that guys get these things on the road, and then before they know it, they're climbing head first into the foot box replacing these things. So what we do is we go for the genuine GM product. Now these are getting harder to find. We actually had to source these from two different sources. So I think we got one from Amazon, and we got one from, I don't know if it was Advance Auto Parts or O'Reilly's, but we got two of them, both the same part number, so they're a D850A, and even the GM part number is the same. That's that 255-24845 number. So you can see the numbers between the two boxes, even though they look quite different, are the same, and the switches installed look exactly the same. So I've got one of the switches right up here. I think you can just see it right there. And then I've got the other one on the brake pedal. Now, keep in mind, the wording in the Factory 5 assembly manual is a little bit confusing because I think they tell you to hook it to the normally open side of the switch, which is not really what it is. It's the normally closed. And the normally closed or normally open, depending on how it's worded, would be whatever the switch is when it's at rest, when it's not mounted into anything. So the switch sitting here on the runway of the lift, this is the switch at rest, not when the plunger is pushed in. So that wording can be very confusing, but basically what you want to do, just to double check before you put these in and before you close up your foot boxes, is you want both of the switches to react when the pedal is pushed. So that's going to mean that the plunger is out, and you want those contacts to be closed when the plunger is out. So you're actually hooking it up to the normally closed side of the switch, because there's the normally closed, and I said these are wired backwards, but I'm going to use the GM switch as the example, even though I'm pointing at the factory 5 switch. So the normally closed is on the front, the normally open is on the back. So both of those get the same. So basically when you push the brake pedal down, the plunger expands and the brake lights are activated. When you push the clutch in, the plunger comes out, it makes the circuit so that the vehicle can start. So they both wire exactly the same. So don't let the wording in the assembly manual confuse you. Just know that you want that to make the circuit, not break the circuit when you actually push the pedal in. So we got those in, and I'm working on actually putting the Maxi fuse right here into the car. And I think where I'm going to mount it, I'm going to mount it in here. I'm going to mount it right up in here. So it's right next to all the other fuses. It'll be face down. And that'll give the car owner all his fuses in one spot. He won't have to hunt everywhere else. Now in the past I've put the relay, the 50 amp relay in here where the cover comes off, and I've put that fuse inside next to it. But in this case, I'm going to put the fuse next to the panel, and I think I did that on the last build. I think I did that in Michael's car, so that all the fuses were in one spot. The relay is not something that has a frequency of failure, but if something were to happen, the fan were to short circuit, you might need to get to the fan fuse, and so this way it'll be somewhere that it's readily available. So in the process of putting that in, I need to kind of move the wire harness out of the way. I'm probably going to drop the fuse box too, but this is one of those things that just aggravates the crap out of me, because I believe a lot of you guys out there, you're going to the build school, and I strongly support the build school. I'm not bashing the build school that is at the Mott College, but I think in some cases you guys are getting bad direction out there. So here's a good for instance. This pillow block and bearing should have the set screws right here. There's a set screw there, and there's actually one on the other side. These should be on the back, because think about this. You're going to put the dash in, and the bottom of the dash has that 90-degree bend on it. It doesn't matter which dash you're using, whether you're using the aluminum dash and you're covering it with vinyl like we are here, or whether you're using the padded dash from Factory 5, which is made of plastic, or you're using the carbon fiber dash. They all have that 90-degree bend on the bottom. So if you ever have to pull the shaft or pull your steering wheel or whatever to maybe service your turn signal switch, your Russ Thompson turn signal switch or our turn signal switch, you're not going to get that thing out because you can't physically get a Allen wrench in behind there to get to those set screws. So basically, you've screwed yourself. And you can't get the dash out because now you can't get the steering wheel loose to get all the other stuff off. So make sure when you put these together that you get those set screws on the back side of that pillow block. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to take this off, I'm going to turn it around. And once I get the shaft out of there, I'm going to show you what I do to prep this upper shaft, because and you guys can flame me all you want after I show you what I'm going to do to it, but it's going to make getting the upper steering shaft out in the future way easier than if you just leave it as it's supplied. All right, I don't want to tell you what it took to get this out of the car, but just know it took those that and that. And I'm going to tell you why. Those pieces, that inner shaft, is machined. And if you look at the corners of it, where there's two flats and then there's the two round portions on the end, that's a sharp corner. But the piece that makes the outer shaft, the piece that's still in the car, okay, the piece that's right down there, right, you can see it right there, that's machine formed. It's basically drawn over a mandrel. And what do you think happens when you draw a piece of steel over a mandrel? It doesn't have nice sharp corners. It has rounded corners. And so what I've done on every build, including Slytherin, when I built Slytherin, I saw how hard it was to get the shaft to go in the first time, is I actually take my angle grinder and I put a, not a brand new, but a new-ish flap wheel on it, and I just go over those sharp corners just to ease the edge of them. And it allows that inner shaft to go into the outer shaft and slide back and forth. The other thing, that this one actually had the Belleville washers in the in between the two shafts. I'm telling you right now, wait to put those Belleville washers in. Even if you have the car completely together and you've forgotten to put them in, the car's not, you're not gonna have a problem. The steering wheel is just gonna be a little sloppy. But you can put those in at any time. It makes pulling that shaft out, especially if you're going to add a turn signal unit, like one of ours or one of Russ's, it makes it so hard to adjust that shaft to get it perfectly so that you have that fit in between the turn signal switch itself and the hub so that they're not grinding together as you turn the wheel. So don't put those Belleville washers in, or spring washers, or what they are. Don't put those in until you're nearly done with the car. Like the last time that steering shaft is going to go in, put them in then. And then that way you'll know exactly where everything's going to go. You put them in early in the build, and you're going to be fighting that thing every time you want to adjust the steering shaft. Because I'm telling you now, the first time you put that steering shaft in is not going to be the last time. And so you might as well wait, put the spring washers in at the end. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to take the flap wheel and the grinder, I'm going to ease the edge of those sharp edges. And like I said, you guys can flame me all you want, but that's what the Belleville washers are for. They're to take up the slack, but the bottom line is you have to be able to get the thing in and out. And then the last thing, before you slide it in for the final time, run a thin coat of axle grease on it. Even if you just use like the spray lithium grease that you use for like your garage door opener and stuff, that stuff will work too. I like using the red high pressure. I think they call it high pressure lube. I like using that because it's sticky, it stays on there, and it kind of stays where it is. It doesn't run out when it gets hot. So you're not going to end up with a stain on the carpeting because the stuff liquefied. So that's what I use. But I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to get that thing all prepped and ready, but I'm not going to put it in quite yet because I want to get that fuse installed first. All right, I was so freaking frustrated yesterday after having to deal with that steering shaft. I mean, the thing was just locked in there. And the spring washers, the Belleville washers, weren't the culprit. The culprit was, it was just too tight. So we clearanced the sharp edges of the steering shaft. I added a little bit of axle grease, high pressure lube, and now it will slide in and out relatively easy. I mean, I've got to grab it, but it slides, right? So now we'll be able to adjust it when we put our brand new IE427 turn signal switch in, because we have to maintain about a 16-inch gap between the face of the turn signal and the face of the hub so that they don't rub together. And so you need to make all these adjustments before you tighten down the pillow block bearings and everything else in there. So make sure you do that ahead of time. And then the last step you're going to do is you're going to put your Belleville washers in and then bring it in for its final adjustment, and then tighten everything down. Until then, don't get carried away, tightening everything down, because you're going to have this in and out of the car more than once. So what I've been working on today is continuing work on all of the wiring, and it's gonna look messy. Don't think that once you start running wires, you're gonna, again, make everything like perfect and it's gonna stand in that spot the first time, because rarely does that happen. But I've done enough of these that I have a pretty good idea where everything is gonna go, and I can make everything look nice and tight and neat later. So I wanna make sure that all of the terminations are done, all my end connectors are on, my ring terminals, all that's on there, you know, including my shrink tubing, so that when I go to dress the wires, that it's all ready to go and I don't have to go back and now cut and put a new connector on and all that. I want to get it close. So what I've done here is I've gone and got our firewall stud, which is going to be our main distribution for all of our hot power. So we've got a direct wire from here to the battery, a direct wire from here down to the starter, a direct wire from here to the alternator, and then we've got a direct wire from here to our Ron Francis harness. I did add another wire in there, which is going to be for our 50 amp fuse for our cooling fan. And I'll go around to the other side of the car. I'll show you how that fuse got installed and where it is. But I've got all that stuff run, and like I said, you're going to end up pulling this stuff apart. I'm really upset that years ago, when Factory 5 supplied you a battery cable, it came with a nice rubber or plastic boot that went over the battery terminal on the end. And I'm going to see if I can grab one out of here that has one. Okay, so I save all these when I don't use them. So if you look right here, this nice little battery boot slides over the terminal on the end and covers it up and keeps it from getting arced out if you were to drop a wrench anywhere near the battery. The battery cables that came on this car did not have that. And this is the battery cable I took off. So you can see this is what Factory 5 provided, and there's no boot on it. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to order one of those up. I may just take the one that's on that battery cable off and install it on our battery cable. But I had one here that was for the negative side, the black, and I got it. Let's see if we can get in there to see where I've got it resting, because I did the ground wires as well. So I don't know if you can see that down in there where the battery cable is right there. I've got a boot on that one already. So I've got the battery cables terminated. I've got all of the main battery cables terminated, and I'm just trying to route everything in a nice, neat fashion. Now, I did use the ground wire that the customer had previously mounted as an engine ground. He actually had two engine grounds. He had one going to the block right here, and he had one going to the motor mount, which, you know, the more grounds the better, but we didn't need both. So I took the one on the motor mount off. We're going to utilize this number 4 ground. It goes to our stud right there, our main grounding stud, and then it goes over to the battery. So everything is grounded the way we need it to be right now. The only other issue that I had was I had to lengthen the blue wire that runs down to the starter to trigger the starter. And I went ahead, I added about an 8-inch piece in there, and got it all tied in and got some shrink tubing on it, so it's all ready to go as well. All of our other wires up here are pretty much done. It's just time for me to dress all these wires and get them in some split loom. The brown wire here, since we're running a 1-wire alternator, will not be used, so I'll go ahead and I'll terminate it and put it inside of the split loom right here on the valley of the intake manifold, so that if you know, the car owner ever changes out and gets a battery that requires an excite wire, it'll be there, and he won't have to run a new one. It'll be already be up there. But that's as far as I got yesterday. I'm gonna go ahead, see if I can get some of that wire kind of dressed and finished off in the engine compartment today, and we'll see where we're at as far as time. All right, I just was online. I ordered about 5 sets of those battery terminal protectors, the little plastic or rubber boots that go over the top of them. So they ought to be here in a couple of days, but I figured I'd walk over here and show you guys where I put that that mega fuse for our fan. So if you look under here, you'll just see it right here. So fuse box is here, that fuse is right next to it. So if it ever needs to be changed or serviced, it'll be right there. I haven't really done anything with the wires for it yet. They're right here, other than sending it through the firewall over there. All this will have to be pulled up out of the way so that the steering shaft doesn't rub on it. And then from the other side, you can see it. It's right here, and just a single screw holds it in place. So I'm going to continue working on getting all the wire cleaned up here in the engine compartment, and I will probably bring you guys back tomorrow. All right, other than a couple of washers and nuts on the ignition coil, I'm pretty much done with all the wiring under the hood. Now, obviously there's going to be some wiring for our headlights and our turn signals and marker lights. And I may do that the next time I'm wiring on the car. But for the most part, the wiring from the firewall forward in the car is all done. And you can see I took some time. I got everything loomed. The stud still has to be tightened, and I might have to put a strap here or there to get the wiring finished. But for the most part, everything's in and everything's loomed. So if you look down here, we've got our alternator wire coming off of the stud. It goes down the valley of the engine, comes over here to the alternator. That stud is also loose. I've got the wires shortened for the distributor because they were a mile long, and they don't need to be just, you know, in a loop. So we shortened those. We've put new connectors on the ends of those, new ring terminals, and those will go on the ignition coil, and that'll be ready to go. The sensors are all done. So both of our coolant temperature sensors are in. The one for our fan is terminated right here. It goes into a water passage on the intake manifold, and the one that we have over here for the speed hut gauges is in and terminated. We've got the oil pressure sending unit down in here, so that's in and terminated as well. Like I said, everything pretty much under the engine as far as electrical is done. So I think what I'm going to concentrate on next is getting the engine ready to first start. So I want to get the angle of the radiator set. So to do that, I'm going to go grab the factory 5 aluminum that make up the side pieces for the radiator, and I'm going to put those in place just so that I can set the angle. We've actually got a 1-piece aluminum for the radiator that's going to be going on this car, but I want to go ahead and use the factory aluminum to set the angle. And then the coolant hoses can all be finished and terminated, meaning right now they're on, but the clamps aren't tight. I don't want to tighten any of that stuff until I have the angle of the radiator set, just so that if there's any movement in them, we don't put any of the clamps or any of the hoses in a bind. So that's pretty much done. I want to go ahead and take care of any of the vacuum lines that we're going to have to run for the carburetor. For instance, the one to the distributor for the vacuum advance. The carburetor had a bunch and still has a couple of vacuum caps on it, and they're rubber. You know, and this car's been sitting for a while, and those rubber vacuum caps I'm not a big fan of because they just deteriorate. You know, years ago you buy a rubber vacuum cap and it would last for 20 years. You buy one now, and after 6-8 months, it's starting to crack and decay. So we're going to replace all those vacuum caps with vinyl vacuum caps, and then get our hose in place for our vacuum advance. I'm going to have to look online to see exactly where the vacuum advance is, which is the metered vacuum port on the carburetor because we want to make sure that's metered so that it, it varies with acceleration so that the vacuum advance works properly. We don't want it just put on a straight vacuum source, because then it'll be advanced all the time. So we'll take care of that. I know that there is a block off plate underneath the carburetor, so that's going to have to come off, and then the carburetor has to go back on before we do first start. We're going to have to do something with the throttle linkage, because right now, since that block off plate is underneath the carburetor, the mechanical arms for the accelerator pedal have not been set up properly. So we want to get those at least as close as we can, so that anything we do from there on out would just be fine tuning. We're going to want to make sure that there's oil in the engine, and maybe even pre-oil the engine by pulling the distributor and getting our tool down there to build oil pressure before we start it. Now, this engine was run when it was built under the impression that it was dynoed as well. So there should be some residual oil on the top end of the motor. So we shouldn't have to pre-lube it, but it doesn't hurt. And then, of course, we're going to have to get coolant into the system as well and check for leaks. And then, other than that, it should be pretty much ready to run. I may just put a mechanical oil gauge on it for first start, so I don't have to put the dash in. And that's really all I'm concerned with. I have a timing light that we can double check timing. Anthony's timing light even does the RPM and everything on it, so we won't even need a tachometer. So all the vitals we'll know, other than possibly water temperature, but I can check that with my my laser pointer, temperature gauge, and we can verify that once the fan comes on, we'll know that that part of it is working properly. And the way we set up our cooling system, we shouldn't have any problems bleeding off the air that might be trapped inside the block. We've done enough of these with small block Fords in them, and I've never had an issue with air pockets in there, but I don't want to jinx it and make this the one that we have trouble with. But, we'll keep an eye on things and make sure that everything's working properly. And probably the last thing what we have to do for first start is get our cooling fan finish wired. We've got the wire finished to the fuse. We have to go from the fuse to our relay, get the relay wired in line with our sensor that's in the engine compartment, and then the fan will be ready to go too. So other than that, I think that's going to close out this one. That's kind of what I'm going to work on the next time we're working on the car, or the next time you guys see an update on it. Also look for an update on our turn signal switch. We have sent out the first couple of coupe, so Gen 3 coupe offerings for our turn signal switch, and those are going in customer cars right now. So I'm hoping to have some good news for all of you coupe guys that have put yourself on our waiting list, and then give you an idea of when you'll be seeing your turn signals. So as always, if you are enjoying the content here, please do the like, the share, the subscribe, all that kind of stuff. We'll see you next time. Have a great day.